They are hard working like us, and they are brave. Our mothers, they have fought for us, made this path.
I'm Holly Kirkby, and I'm a singer-songwriter from Exeter, and I play the piano. I'm really largely influenced by jazz music, and I've had a few radio plays at the moment, and it's just building connections, and it's been a really good experience over the last couple of years in the music world. In my own music, I did have to face the kind of structure and the imposed things that kind of lead to people listening and getting involved with your art. And for a long time, I really put a lot of effort into structure and form and never really found it fit for me. And I just started freely singing and playing the piano to express all my emotion, and I kind of called it narrative as just a new kind of style. And that was incredibly difficult because when you're writing purely from your personal perspective and often through quite a metaphoric sense, you never know if people can really identify or get involved with your music. And so that was quite a scary prospect, putting my complete raw emotion out. It will be, a 6-minute song and I'll just be shouting at whatever's made me feel that way. And so putting that out there for people to listen to and having them judge that against standards, which are so in one way rigid, but often with music luckily not so rigid, is definitely a very worrying thing. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of support from people to ever really start putting out what I liked and not worrying about whether or not the other people saw it in the same way. Growing up, I've always been not a girly girl, and I really grew to hate what that meant. And becoming an adult in my life, I've really found that people have said, "Oh, you can't wear that. You look like a boy," or "That's not girly enough," or "You can't play rugby because it's not a girl sport." And I found that really frustrating, and I really let it get to me and went out shopping for pink and all of this. And then as I've gotten a bit older, I've just come to realise who is putting that pressure on me as a girl. And it's people that really don't deserve the time. It's people who want you to be kind of this manufactured girl, a beauty standard, and I don't think that. I think you should just be yourself.
Boys protect girls, take over us, united as a front, 'cause you're one of us.
I think one of the most important things that, since becoming more aware of the issue, that I've noticed in my daily life is how ingrained these issues are. And for example, I was at work and I was just listening to all the kind of pet names that were gender specific, and the words like, "Don't do press-ups like that, they're girly press-ups," for things that weren't, masculine and hard and difficult, and "Girls cry, boys don't cry." And I was just becoming so aware of how ingrained, especially I find in kind of older generations, it's because no one's really pointed it out and it's just been the norm. And I think writing this song, I really wanted to draw attention to the fact that despite this is the norm, we need to talk about it, and that despite it being ingrained, it's really something that I just wanted to bring awareness and invite people to actually consider it if they haven't yet, or really consider what it meant to them personally. And I just wanted to change, just opinions, and if not that, just whether or not people give this topic some consideration. So I asked the man, I said, do you realise that that's really gender specific? And he had no idea, he didn't even know that he was doing it.
So my name is Dr. Lorna and I am the Chair of Women in STEM Plymouth. So We are a local voluntary organisation that is is entirely voluntary, so there's no one that kind of is paid. We're all just people that are passionate about gender equality. We have 3 aims, or 3 streams, if you will, of our kind of work. The first is to inspire young women to consider a career in science, technology, engineering or maths, irrespective and free from society's stereotypes. We don't necessarily want them to choose science, technology, engineering or maths, but we want them to make that choice freely, and we don't believe at the moment that that choice is free, because young women in particular are very much steered, often completely unconsciously, away from those subjects. Second thing is to support women who already have roles in those fields, so in science, technology, engineering and maths, because it can be really isolating if you're the only woman in your company or your building or your office, or even if you're not the only woman but there's not very many of you. And I think we can all think back to a time in our lives when we just felt a little bit left out, and how that isn't the most empowering feeling. So we want to provide a space and a networking opportunity for those women to get together and support each other, and sort of support young women that are kind of trying to make that choice as well. And then the third activity or stream that we look into is promoting the activities of women in science, technology, engineering and maths, about kind of celebrating people when they don't celebrate themselves, and kind of saying, look, there's all this fantastic work going on that people don't know about, so can we just kind of have you speak at our event, or could you do this, or could we promote you in this way, so that those people can just have their profile raised a little bit, and so that the local community kind of realises that there are actually literally hundreds of fantastic women working in science, technology, engineering and maths in Plymouth. They're right there. You just have to scratch the surface to find them. It's not. I would like to live in a Plymouth where if I go to a STEM company of any size, it is equally likely that I meet a woman or a man when I walk through the door. It's equally likely that I meet a woman or man on the shop floor, or equally likely that I meet a woman or a man in the lab or doing any of those things. And it's equally likely that it's a woman or a man at the top of that organisation. I don't want to think in my mind before I get there to be imagining the people that I'm going to meet and imagining them all one gender, which is kind of the situation now. Even if you're as immersed in women in STEM as I am, there's still biases there. There's still things you have to check yourself with. So I'd like to be able to go to STEM companies and just be like, some people, and not ever kind of be surprised by who I meet, and not ever have any kind of expectations about who I'm going to meet. It would also be lovely to go into schools to speak to teachers and see that all of the subjects are chosen by boys and girls in roughly equal proportions, or like if there's differences, those differences are because of the teacher, or because they're local differences in classes or in schools. They're not kind of across the city as a whole. And that doesn't sound like much. It kind of sounds like a really little aim, but because it's fed by these big unconscious biases that run throughout society, it's a huge thing. So sometimes when I'm trying to say what my utopian STEM Plymouth is, it sounds kind of silly. I think it sounds really little, but it's not. It's really big, because it's a small change based on a huge shift in perception.
My name is Sovay Berriman, and I'm proprietor of Plumbmaid. By working for myself, I can basically take time off when I want to, and I can work the hours I wish. I don't need to be told by anyone apart from my client what needs to be done, and obviously, I wanted a business that would sit well alongside my art practice, which is pretty well established, and I have no intention of disbanding that part of my operation. So I needed an income stream that I could manage, and not have someone telling me I needed to be working on a boiler when actually I want to be installing an exhibition somewhere. I was really open about this is a move because I can't live precariously any longer. My future is so insecure. I was 42 or 43 when I started my plumbing training, and I just thought, I can't live like this when I'm 53 or 63, and nothing's gonna change if I don't take the reins and make a change. So it is me looking after myself. Yeah, I was pretty open about that, and I think that was generally pretty appreciated. Just opening that discussion really about, look, we can't live like this. This is ridiculous. There's fewer and fewer options for earning money, and certainly ways to earn money that you can rely upon. I presented it as something about being powerful and taking control of my own future, and that's, yeah, people can get really behind that.
I like detail, that sort of thing. And so at school, I was always kind of funneled towards STEM. But when I look back, I was an extremely able student. And yet my teachers never pushed me towards the kind of the maths and the physics kind of things. It was always like they were very happy with my decision to pursue kind of biology and geology and art and chemistry. And I remember my teachers always used to say, oh, you'd be a good teacher because you can explain things to people. And I think now when I'm talking to people about how much my job as an engineer involves communicating with people, why was that never considered? Like, they only ever thought about the technical aspects of those roles, and I was kind of slightly ushered away from them. With the best will in the world, I had fantastic teachers. They weren't at all bad. But it's that kind of just sort of shunted one way. And now when I do careers advice and I talk about how engineering is a career for people that like other people and are good at communicating, because really what you're doing is solving a problem, and science is the same. You're solving a problem, whether you're doing it by just sort of designing things in an engineering-y kind of way, experimenting, hypothesising in a sort of more sciencey kind of way. There's masses of crossover.
At my sixth form centre, the local council seemed to be funding a women's officer for young people, like a youth worker. And this woman reached out to a lot of young women who were in difficult straits and invited us to join a women's group. And I was in difficult straits as a teenager, and I really didn't want to join her women's group. I really rejected it, which I think is common when you're in a very difficult place. You're just very like, leave me alone, I'm getting through it, and kind of I don't have the capacity for anything else. Thankfully, a few years later on, I came across this woman again, and I did start going to her group, and I was in a different place, and she just really believed in me and all the other women in the group, and it sort of pricks my eyes with tears a bit talking about it. I don't feel like I've ever had anybody say to me that they believed in me, that they thought I was an amazing young woman and I was strong and able, and this is what this woman gave to me and to the other women in the group. And we were all in the group because we'd experienced homelessness, and we had a variety of different backgrounds and experiences, and she drew us out of ourselves and then galvanised us to work with her to fundraise and set up a young women's centre in Truro in Cornwall, and make this a short-term hostel for homeless young women. And we managed it over a number of years. And but I would say then I've always looked towards women who are older than me and looked to learn and watch their example and see how they manage their lives and how they are in the world. And I have a customer who conducts herself with such grace, and I really enjoy doing work for her.
I haven't worked in a very male-dominated environment for very long. Most of my career has been in the softer STEM subjects, so biology particularly, which tends to be fairly equal, pretty much equal actually, certainly at the lower levels. So I have been fortunate to not experience too much kind of hostile sexism in my career. Engineering is less so, it's very much more male-dominated. But even so, there's not very much hostile kind of sexism. There's a lot of benevolent sexism in work and outside of it. And I think that's the thing that I experience a lot more of. And that's probably common to most women, I would say. The idea is that if you think about microaggressions, they're like wires in an old-fashioned bird cage. And actually one wire on its own, so let's say sexist language or gendered language, doesn't trap the bird. But when you have lots of wires, it forms a cage. And so it's why this kind of idea of women being oppressed. If you speak to be fair, a lot of men about the idea of women being an oppressed sex, they get really defensive about it. Because they only see one wire, they see those, and they think, well, there's no cage. But actually, if you think about it as a whole, and you look at, if you're on the inside, and you just get those, everywhere you look, there's wires. It's really tiring and really annoying, and it really grinds you down, and you can't fly. To extend the metaphor, probably a little bit too much, So, but people don't see that because if you're on the outside and your cage is there, and you're just seeing one wire. It's not a problem, it's just a wire.
Always had the strong sense of the fair and the equal. I grew up in an environment where when I was fairly young, I didn't live with my mum, I lived with my dad. So my parents divorced, my brother and I lived with my dad and his male partner. There was no women in the house. I was the only woman. The 70s and 80s and to a certain extent the 90s were pretty different as far as equality is concerned than what we have now. I mean, I think sexism was far more open and rife and visible and experienced every day, in my view. And it wasn't uncommon to be catcalled in the street by builders, etc. Being a young person in that environment, only having males at home, I have an attitude where I'm not going to be kept down by anybody, and certainly not men, and certainly not because of my gender or whoever else I happen to be. I experienced a lot of sexism in the 80s. Like at school, we weren't allowed to do metalwork and woodwork for GCSE, for instance. So me and a group of other girls campaigned to be allowed to sit in on the technical drawing classes, but we had to sit at the back of the class and we weren't allowed to take the exam. We also started a campaign at school to try and allow us to play football and rugby because we weren't allowed, and later was like an NUS women's officer and stuff. When I was involved with the Truro Young Women's Centre, I came across women who actually didn't trust men and who didn't necessarily want things to be equal. They didn't like men. They looked down upon men. And I think I really rallied against that. I think men are as much victim of patriarchal society and the history of patriarchy as women. Yeah, equality definitely is something I would always continue to strive for. I never experienced sexism in the plumbers, merchants and that. I've had a handful of customers who didn't engage me, and my feeling was it was gender-based, but I think it's not just about gender. It wasn't about them as individuals being sexist. I think it's something about culture. They all happened to be men who'd worked on like building sites. I think it was also about like comfort, like who they felt comfortable talking to or making an arrangement with. But generally, I don't come across sexism in plumbing. What I do come across is maybe a bit of ignorance about the difficulty of challenging accepted social norms and doing something different. There's a lot of guys out there who think, yeah, we're not we haven't got a problem, just come on in, there's nothing stopping you, just come and join and blah blah. That's cool, I'm glad they think like that, but I think what they don't stop and think about is all the adverts on telly, all the magazines, all the way people are spoken to at school, what options there are for them, what people talk about on break time, on construction sites, or the kind of language, or is there a toilet, is there somewhere to dispose of sanitary items on site? Those can all be blocks. There's still a lot of ill-informed people who mean well and want to make change, and they believe they are making change, and they are. They could get a lot better informed, but I think sometimes a block to them becoming better informed is some of the righteousness of feminism, who call out inequalities.
Like, why can't boys read books about girls? Like, why does it have to be that girls can read books about boys, but boys can't read books about girls, or boys can't play with Barbie, but girls can play with any toy? Like, and we're much more accepting now of the girl as a tomboy than we are of the boy who might be a bit more gender fluid, or just be a boy and like some girly things. There's nothing is for girls and for boys, they're just things. Why do we have to genderise everything? Why do we have to put things in boxes? Let's just not do that with anything, including the STEM careers. Thank you very much.
Mothers, they are strong like us, and they are wise like us, and they are brave. Our daughters, they are inspired like us, they are hardworking like us, and they are brave. Our mothers, they have fought for us, made this path for us, made it a little easier for us. Our daughters, and they will find a way to open up the doors that have been locked for so long. And girls protect girls, look after us. Boys protect girls, take over us. United as a front, 'cause you're one of us. It's difficult enough being one of us. And girls protect girls, and I believe in that. Some of us girls are under attack. Can't lose ourselves now if we're gonna win this fight. Hands on your hips and prepare to take flight. Do you think it's easy now? Do you think it's easy now? Do you think it's easy now? Do you think it's easy? No. Lost whichever which way I go. Ask if it applies to you, and still I'm told no. And turned away whichever which way I turn. Told complications are my concern. Stuck no matter how fast I run. Want me standing still looking pretty undone. Take a hold of a world which is equally yours. Take a hold of your femininity and reach for the stars. Don't you dare think it's easy now. Do you think it's easy now? 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 difficult enough being one of us. Girls protect girls, and I believe in that. Some of us girls are under attack. You can't lose ourselves now if we're gonna win this fight. Hands on your hips,